We'll start with a 2-minute opening message from you, General Cannon, and then we'll move into our questions. So go away. And
First of all,
please use the microphone.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Well, I got to do the mic.
Yeah, but
I
you
was
should need
told
to
this was the funky mic.
just tap it, and it should work.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I appreciate you giving us time to hear what we have to say and have this conversation about issues. And I appreciate the sponsoring entities for making this opportunity to have this conversation possible. So now my time starts, right? I can tell you a story about another forum I was at. So here's what I talk about. I was raised by my Irish immigrant grandmother. And she used to tell me many things, but one that I remember is don't be part of the problem. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. Washington is broken. The 113th Congress is the most do-nothing Congress since Harry Truman was president. And like you, I'm disappointed with politicians who are unwilling to compromise in the best interest of those who elected them. I have been a public servant my entire professional life. People have counted on me to step up and be involved and to serve and protect our way of life in northern Michigan. I've done that gladly. I'm ready to do that again. I'm ready to set my personal life aside and to roll up my sleeves and to go to work. Not just go to a place and call it work, but go do the hard things that have to be done to advance the important issues of the people of this district. Like protecting our environment, protecting public education, protecting and promoting our economy, fight for equality, fight for opportunity for our young people. Things like ensuring that the promise of Social Security and Medicare are kept at the same level so the people, our seniors, have some peace of mind and dignity at that point in their life. To make sure that our veterans get the same level of care and service as the 48 states that are ahead of Michigan. And to make sure that, you know, in my experience as a private to a general, and from a patrolman to a sheriff, I know how to get things done. I know how to bring people together and how to find common ground to solve problems. There are no quick fixes. Slow and steady wins the day, but people expect action, results, and accountability. They want to be listened to, and they want to know that their voices are heard and are taken into consideration. They know that working in the middle is where progress is found. We take an oath, we make a promise, we have an obligation to make sure that we represent all of the people and that their actions, as a representative of the people, their actions reflect what their words are.
Your time's up. Thank you. Bill, you have the first question?
I do.
Mic on?
Yes, I believe. That's on.
Okay, there we go.
Better if I'm closer like
Yeah.
this? Okay. General Cannon, as you've been talking to constituents during your campaign, what do you see as the most important issue facing voters in northern Michigan?
Well, I'll tell you, excellent question, and you can find many varied and different answers depending on who you talk to. Obviously, one of the biggest concerns in the district is the economy, and how do we create sustainable year-round jobs for the people who choose to stay in the district. And so we primarily focus on young people, but it would be everybody. And so there's a number of ways that we can get after that, but that needs to be the priority. The other thing that I hear often is that we want to make sure that we're doing everything humanly possible to protect the environment and to make sure that our young people have opportunities, and that kind of goes to public education. There's some great concerns in that regard as well. And at the same time, we're working to make sure that we take care of our seniors and our veterans and our working families. And so a lot of answers to a very simple question, but that's what I'm hearing as I make my rounds around the district. And I've been everywhere. And I've listened to everybody over the last 16 months. And I genuinely believe what they're saying is what they feel in their hearts. And they want to see some change. They want to see some progress.
Thank you. And remember, no rebuttals. Just clarifying. Michael, you ready?
Yes. Healthcare reform has been a major political battle in this country. What do you like about the Affordable Care Act, and what don't you like about the law?
Well, the first thing is, I think what we all acknowledge, thank you, is that we needed to do something. When I was a sheriff, everybody has this idea that the insurance industry and healthcare was perfect before the Affordable Care Act. I can tell you, as a sheriff, I had to struggle every year. My insurance premiums were going up 15 and 20%. And I had to figure out a way. My board of commissioners wasn't going to give me any more money, so I had to really work hard to kind of figure that one out. There's so many, I think we all know the good things that are in the Affordable Care Act. The things that aren't to everybody's liking, I think what we got to do is quit talking about repealing it and sit down and roll up our sleeves and start talking about fixing it, amending it, revising it. And so, like any piece of major social legislation, Social Security being one, or Medicare, there's always a hue and cry about what this is going to do to the country. This is a great piece of legislation that over time, once we work out the bugs, will be a great addition to what we have with Social Security and what we have with Medicare. People need to have access to health care. If you're working 40 hours a week and you still can't afford to buy a life insurance or health insurance, there's something wrong. And so this addresses that in a very comprehensive way. Thank you.
Jeremy?
What more can be done, can the federal government do to ensure the aging Enbridge oil pipeline in the Straits of Mackinac is structurally sound and the Great Lakes are not at risk?
Well, I agree that anything that we do in the energy industry can never, ever be at the expense of the environment. And so when I look at, when we talk about the Straits of Mackinac, we should also include in that Indian River where the pipeline crosses there. And the entire stretch to Manistee from the Straits, that pipeline runs the entire southern border of the Upper Peninsula. And so we have great exposure here. And so what I think, everybody's sort of pointing the finger in the other direction. I think we got to make sure that, for me, I would ask the industry, do you even need this pipeline? I understand there have been 2 new pipelines built, one going through Ontario, one going through Wisconsin. I would imagine that there was some kind of logic to do that. Maybe that this pipeline is beyond its useful life. If the pipeline isn't needed, take it out. If it is needed, then you need to, in my view, you just need to replace it. And the people that need to replace it are the ones that own it, and they need to do it to the standard that would pass muster today. If we put that pipeline in today, it would not be, if we wanted to put it in, it would not be allowed. Okay, so we can take no risk. What we have, this has such great economic impact that we can't take any risk. We are all about pure Michigan. One of our biggest industries is tourism. Nobody is going to want, it'll be like the Gulf of Mexico if we have a mistake. That pipeline is 60 years old, and when the industry says it's okay, that's okay. I would like somebody else to go and tell me that some of the same things.
Thank you, General. Bill?
Politicians speak regularly about job creation and getting Americans back to work. How do we do that?
Well, I tell you, what you have to do, the answers aren't in Washington. I'll be the first to admit that. The answers probably aren't even in Lansing. The best answers are in the local community. So you got to make sure that you build and establish a good working relationship with our local leaders. The future of northern Michigan, we're always going to have some mining and some forestry and some tourism and some agriculture. We're going to have all that. But we need to do more than that. And so what we have to do is make sure that we are doing everything possible to make sure that small enterprise has a shot of being successful. So new startups. The economic engine of northern Michigan is startups. And so they're not all going to make it. But if some of them make it, that's where the jobs are. Now we got 3 great state universities in the Upper Peninsula, in the district, but in the upper, and we have phenomenal community colleges. They can be incubators of innovation. But one of the things we need to make sure that we have is that everybody has, for example, broadband. You could have the greatest idea in the world, and you could make that in your barn, if you so chose, and the world become your marketplace. But you got to have broadband to be able to do that. And then when you want to ship it, you've seen the commercial, if it fits in the box, you ship it. We got to make sure our post offices stay in business so we can take advantage of that as well. And so there's a lot of answers. 90 seconds isn't hardly enough to talk about that. We've got great opportunities here in northern Michigan, and I'd like to talk to you offline about that further if we get a chance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Immigration has become a challenging diplomatic issue for the current administration. How should the U.S. move forward on an immigration policy?
I think we need to have comprehensive immigration reform for a variety of reasons. If it's going to be necessary to advance the issue and get it in front of Congress, that we talk about reinforcing the border, fine. If that's what we got to do, I don't think that's the answer. But if that's the big stumbling block, let's get that out of the way. I can tell you, in this district, we have tremendous agricultural communities that rely on farm labor to come into the area. It's getting harder and harder to conduct those kinds of businesses. And so there's some things you just can't automate. And so I'm all about comprehensive immigration reform. I'm not about an amnesty. I am second generation Irish in this country. And so I think everybody's got to go back, identify yourself. 15 million, I've heard. You got to identify yourself, get in line, let's go through the process. If the process is a burden, let's fix the process. Okay? If a child was born in this country because their parents snuck in, and that child had nothing to do with that. And so the dreamers, I think they get to go to the head of the line. I think if we talk about 15 million people coming out of the shadows and going to work, why does everybody want to come to this country? It's the greatest country in the world. And you don't realize that until you go to other parts of the world. People want to come here like all of our ancestors did because of the opportunity. And so if we get 15 million people to come out of the shadows and go into the ranks of the employed, they're going to make great contributions to our country, and they'll be contributing to Social Security and all the other social programs as well. Thank you.
Would you support putting troops on the ground in effort to eliminate the threat of ISIS?
This is a tough one, and there's a lot of details that we probably need to talk about before we get into that, and I can't do that in 90 seconds. So let me cut to the chase. The first thing that we always need to think about when we talk about deploying military, our military forces around the world, is not whether we should do it, but what do we got to do once we get there? What's the exit strategy? What are we trying to accomplish? And so once you have that in mind, then you can go back to that question everybody thinks is the first one. What you have to always make sure that we do first and foremost, and we are, is exhaust all the diplomatic options around the table. Well, how in the world could you negotiate and have diplomacy with a terrorist group? You can't. And so my answer is, but what's going on is behind the scenes with the countries that are in the region that you do have diplomatic relations, and you have to get them to be willing to step up and get involved in what's going on in that part of the world. Those are the folks that are going to do the boots on the ground, not us. This is an ideology, and we don't want to add fuel to the fire with us putting our troops in. We can be very supportive with intelligence and logistics and air support and all kinds of other things. But the simple answer is the local countries in the region need to be the boots on the ground, and we can be there for support. The conversation changes a little bit if ISIS or ISIL or IS go into Turkey. Now we're going to start talking about NATO. Or if the UN goes in, that changes it as well. And that's all I can say in 90 seconds.
Trust me, later in the evening, you guys will appreciate this 90-second. So, Billy, would you like to go next?
Yes. What should be done about corporations exploiting offshore tax loopholes to avoid paying taxes in the United States?
I think we need to pass some legislation to stop that. I think one of the ways that we might be able to do that is to, let's get after the tax code. Maybe our corporate tax code is, our corporate tax rate is too high. And so if we could bring that down to, there's a variety of opinions on what it would be. If we could bring it down to 25%, I think that might take the wind out of some of the interest or the desire to do those kinds of things. We need to keep these, and a lot of it, there's a lot of different reasons why people do those things. But listen, those companies started here, they got established here. They're a great part of the fabric of many communities, and it just seems so disingenuous to want to make the money here, but you want to sort of shelter it somewhere else. That's just not the American way. Everybody needs to pay their fair share. The way I grew up, that's what everybody expects. You work hard, you play by the rule, everybody's supposed to do their fair share. And so when those corporations leave, somebody else has got to pick up the slack. And who is that? That's the average taxpayer. We can't do that. We can't afford to do that. And so I think we need to pass some legislation to make it illegal to move a company offshore just to avoid paying taxes.
Michael, you're next.
What measure would you support to slow the impact of climate change on our planet?
To slow, well, that's a hot button. Let's talk about slowing the rate of climate change. Well, listen, the Earth is warming, the ice is melting, the water is rising. We got a problem. We could argue all day long about what's causing it. That's a debate for another day. What are we going to do about it? If you just look at the hurricane a couple years ago that hit New Jersey and New York City and put everything underwater, we got a problem. And so if you live in a low-lying area, there are countries in this world that are only 2 or 3 feet above sea level. We got a problem. And so what we need to do is make sure slowly, we all want the lights to come on, so slowly we got to reduce, all these emissions. And so reducing the amount of coal over time and growing the green energy and those technologies, how can you speed that up? You can speed that up by leveling the playing field. Let's give the green energies the same tax advantages as the oil and gas industry has. If you don't want to do that, then take away from the oil and gas industry. But we need to level the playing field. We didn't think we could be at 10% by now. We're already there. And we had an initiative not too long ago to be at 25% by 25. I'm telling you, we can do this. But we got to make sure that the lights go on. So we draw down coal slowly as we build the base load using biomass. There's a great example of a biomass 15 megawatt power plant up in Lance. Creates all kinds of second and third order effects as far as jobs. There's a lot of things that we can do, but not in 90 seconds.
Jeremy, please.
Do you support mandatory background checks on all gun purchases?
I absolutely do. I can talk about that, but I can save that time for another question. But let me tell you, as a sheriff, I think if you go downtown in Kalkaska, we have Jack's. In Traverse City, they have Hamble. I'm sure you have a gun shop here. Everybody gets a record check. What I don't like is when the traveling gun show comes through and sets up once a year, and you don't have to do it there. That's not right. Everybody, if you buy a gun from someone like that, you need to do a record check. The one thing that I would like to explore is that when you look at the tragedies that have happened in recent memory, the issue, the people that were involved had serious mental health issues. And so I think when we do this record check, we need to have a little line that goes over to a box. I don't want to know the details. I know there's HIPAA requirements and all of that. But if there's been a major, not depression or PTSD, but just a major mental health issue, that should go into this repository. We just want to know that it was there. And if their name is in that group, then you got to come back to the sheriff and let's talk about it. This is talk about it. You shouldn't be able to buy a gun just automatically. Now listen, you can still drive a car into a crowd of people. You can still buy a hammer and run around and try to hit people in the head. I understand all that. But on this firearms business, we just look at what's happened recently, and I think we need to just tighten things up just a little bit. We'll never, ever, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. You'll never, ever take guns away from the people in our country. But I'm all for responsible gun ownership.
Must or can be done about Russia and its continued involvement in Ukraine?
Well, I think we're doing a pretty good job with the economic sanctions, so I think more of the same, it certainly is having an effect. And, again, military action is probably the last option that we should ever consider. I'm not sure you're going with that with your question, but I think the economic sanctions, the diplomacy, those are the answers to those kinds of issues. And so I understand what Mother Russia wants. They want to be the big dog on the block like they were with the USSR. They got great history. I understand what Putin wants. But I think the way we hold everything in check, we're not going to go back to the USSR. We're not going to have that. I've served with some great people in the military in Latvia, which is one of the former satellite countries of the USSR. They're doing phenomenally well. Okay? they are terrified right now about what might happen as they look at what happened what's going on in the Ukraine. And so, we need to make sure that, and in Michigan, we have a partnership with Latvia. We also have a partnership currently with Liberia. But in terms of Russia, we need to make sure that we continue taking full advantage of all the diplomatic options and the economic sanctions. I think they are working in our favor.
Michael?
How should we strengthen protection for the Great Lakes?
Well, I would oppose any, and we talked earlier about the pipeline. We need to make sure that the Great Lakes are, you just redline it. No drilling, no more pipelines, none of those kinds of things. And so anything that we can do environmentally to make sure that, we need to be vigilant. It's really on us. We just need to make sure that, we're making sure that people know that we're paying attention and that they're watching and that we're not going to stand for any risk to the Great Lakes. Now listen, we're not the only state that's around the Great Lakes. But there's a great coalition, including Canada, that I think shares the same vision. And so we need to do everything within our power to make sure that we don't do anything. I mean, it's 20% of the world's fresh water supply. I mean, there are a lot of people that are coveting the fresh water that we have. You just have to look out west. We got to make sure that we stand together, all the states and Canada, on this issue, that we need to protect it and we need to manage it and we need to do all the right things. So, for example, Asian carp, that's not helpful. Drilling in the Great Lake, that's not helpful. There's just too much at risk. So, anything and everything above, as far as all options to protect the Great Lakes, I'm good with all of that.
Last question already, Jeremy.
Having prepared for this election and apart from party affiliation, provide our audience with those qualities or ideals that differentiates you from your opponent.
Well, I'm going to talk about this. Did I still get my closing
You can
statement?
still get your closing statement, yeah.
Talk about this fight. Listen, here's what I think is missing. I think leadership is missing. And what's happening in our political process is that now we have splinter groups that's making it harder and harder. And I'm not suggesting one party is any better than the other. I mean, I'm sure there is gerrymandering since the beginning of the idea. Everybody's probably done it. But now we have these splinter groups. We've sort of configured these districts where it's almost guaranteed one side or the other is going to win. Makes it hard. And so you got to have leadership. Someone that's willing to stand up and say, this isn't the right thing for the people of the district. The other thing is, I think you got to have political courage and to do the right thing for the right reasons. We are asked to do this. We are elected to do this. The people of the district have to be first and foremost. The moment you go to Washington and start thinking that you want to stay there, that you like it there, you want to stay there, you've lost your sense of purpose and direction. That is not what it's about. It's about serving the people of this district. I had 15 seconds to go.
Well, you ended on a good note. And now, General Cannon, you have, and Ben, this is 2 minutes on this one. You have 2 minutes to share
Less
with
than
you.
15 seconds.
Doesn't work that way. To share any closing comments you might have.
Well, I want to again thank the sponsors for putting this on. This is a phenomenal opportunity to have a conversation. I wish my opponent was here. It would have been a great opportunity to contrast the candidates, but now I start my closing. As I said before, Congress is broken, and unless we demand it, we, all of us together, nothing is going to change. Congressman Benishek has had 4 years to do something about it, but he hasn't, and I don't think he will. The moment you begin thinking about how to stay in office, we're in trouble. The best interest of the people is lost in the shuffle. We cannot waste another 2 years. It's time for a change. By now, I would expect our Congress to have embraced the level of constituent service of its predecessors. Bart Stupak, Bob Davis, great constituent service. And have a close working relationship with our state and our local leaders. I would look for our Congress to have been a leader in legislation that he authored or sponsored or passed, or be some important committee work that could have helped veterans rather than hurt them. To be a leader in the fight for unemployment benefits last Christmas, or for the Great Lakes, or for the Great Lakes Restoration, or for the Essential Air Service, or for the Postal Service, or for electric rates, or on the environment. Anything that was going to benefit this district, I would expect him by now to be a champion. If not a leader, I would want our congressman to be a fighter against the worst absurdity of all, the sequestration. Let's not think about this. Let's just sort of make massive, gross cuts to domestic programs. Terrible. Or shutting the government down. Our efforts to privatize Social Security or Medicare, make it a voucher program, I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, we can't stand for this. The list goes on. I'm not a doctor. I think all of those things are a prescription for failure. Again, it's time for change. What I think we need, I mentioned this already, is leadership and political courage. We need a congressman who isn't looking to stay. We want someone that's going to be a leadership. When you talk about leadership, we're talking about leaning forward. We're going against the grain. We're talking about standing tall. We're talking about having the grit to tell your caucus, this doesn't make sense. It's not in the best interest of the people of my district. I'm going to cross party lines if it's necessary to make sure that the best interests of the people are taken care of. This is Michigan's first district. We need a first-class effort to make sure that we get a fair shake. Our congressman has had 4 years to earn his stripes. The choice is yours. Our records speak for themselves. It's time for a change. Only you can make it happen. I disagree with the congressman on many things, but I do agree on one thing. Enough is enough. My name is Jerry Cannon. I'd be proud to be your congressman, and I ask for your vote to make that happen.